Hi, how's it going? Welcome to a quick video on how to play Magic the Gathering. Just a disclaimer here right off the bat, this is not going to be a super in-depth guide on how to play. This is going to be it's a general primer on how to play. Now, I've been making videos on YouTube for a little while now. I've been pretty recently trying to get more into Magic the Gathering content on my YouTube channel. However, there's a bit of a dilemma. I've been playing other games, so I imagine most of the people who've been watching my channel previously may not understand how to play Magic the Gathering. So I just wanted to give you a quick chance to, watch this video, maybe pick up a thing or two. If you're, not someone who's watched my channel often, there's definitely better videos, on how to play Magic the Gathering at a more in-depth level. But this is just, a general primer so people who are watching my videos who don't actually play Magic can understand what's happening in the game, basically. So, without further ado, let's hop into a quick bot game. I built a deck that hopefully covers most of the effects you can expect to see in a normal game of Magic the Gathering, at least right now in constructed. Who knows what'll happen in the next couple of years. Mechanics are always, getting pretty wonky, so... Oh, shit. What the heck? No, I don't want this. Bot match. There we go. Let's get in there. Let's see what happens. Now, at the beginning of each game, someone is selected to go first. Usually it's just random. So in this game, our opponent has been selected to go first. The only real advantage our opponent's going to have here going first is that they get to play first. The detriment of going first is that you're not allowed to draw a card on your first turn. We are allowed to draw a card on our opening hand, so we'll get one extra card over our opponent, but they're going first, so usually, it's considered more advantageous to go first, but, we'll see. We'll see what happens here. Now, look at your hand here, and if we want to, we can choose to keep these cards and play with them, or we can take a mulligan here. We would put the cards away, we would draw 7 more cards, and if we liked that hand, we could keep it, but we would have to put one of those cards back into our deck. If we didn't like that hand, we can keep mulliganing, and every time you mulligan, you draw 7 new cards, but each time you do it, you have to return 1 extra card. So if we mulligan twice, we have to return 2 cards back to our deck once we decide to keep. If we mulligan 3 times, we have to return 3 cards, so on and so forth, right? This hand is looking pretty good, so we're going to keep it here. But that's how mulligans work. Now, hopping into this game, we are going to start this turn off by playing a land. Now, I'm going to go into full control mode, because if I play a land, it's going to immediately pass to my opponent, and I just want to explain how lands work real quick. In our deck that we're currently playing, we have 2 basic land types. We have plains, and we have islands. Each land taps for a specific color of mana. Oh, I gotta mute you. Freaking Sparky, get out of here. I'm trying to explain how this game works. So, each land taps for a specific color of mana. Islands tap for blue mana. Plains tap for white mana, right? You can think of it like, what are they, gems, I think, in Hearthstone? I actually forget what the resource is called now. Think of it like gems in Hearthstone, or if you play like a deck builder, Ember from Monster Train, Energy from Slay the Spire, things like that, right? You use lands to generate resources so you can play the cards in your hand. We, though, have a couple of special lands in our hand here, too. We have a Tranquil Cove, which enters the battlefield tapped, which means that in the turn we play this, we can't use it. However, we do gain 1 life when it enters, and more importantly, this land taps for both white or blue. Not both in the same turn, but it can tap for one or the other each turn. So, there's that. We have Deserted Beach, same idea. Taps for white or blue. However, this is what we would call a slow land. You need to have 2 lands already on the field, or else this enters tap. So if we wait on this one, we play it a little slow. With this land, it'll actually enter in untapped and be, more effective than one of these other lands here. We're going to start off with playing an island here. Simple as that. If we wanted to, we could tap it. We would generate 1 blue mana, right? We're not going to do that because we have nothing to spend it on. So we'll just hit Z to undo. But we have no 1 mana spells in our deck here. Or in our hand, I mean. We do have some in the deck, but we just didn't draw any here. Now, I should explain mana cost 2 before we, pass to our opponent here. Each non-land card here has a mana cost, right? Luminarch Aspirant here is a creature that costs 2 mana. 1 white mana specifically, and then the number there next to it, 1, is just a generic mana cost. It can be any color mana that goes into it, right? Look at, for example, Winged Words here. That's 1 blue and 2 generic mana. So 3 total. 1 specifically blue, 2 whatever other colors you got to play it, right? We'll get into creatures in a bit, but for now, we'll just pass our turn back to the opponent here. See what they're doing on their turn, too. They play a Plains. Ooh, and they've got a Shrine Keeper, which is just a 2/2 creature. We will play our creature in response here. Luminarch Aspirant. Ah, shoot, I should have gone into full control there for a second. Okay. So, a couple things happen there. Don't worry about it too much. But all you gotta know is that right now, we have a creature. If you look there at the bottom right, you can see the stats that our creature has. Our creature is a 2/2. Our opponent's creature is also a 2/2. Those numbers indicate your creature's power, which is the number on the left, and toughness, which is the number on the right side of the split there, right? Power is the amount of damage your creature deals in combat. Toughness is the amount of damage your creature can take before it dies, or it technically gets destroyed. That's sort of the mechanic in this game is destroyed, right? If we wanted to, our opponent is attacking us with their Shrine Keeper right now. So just to explain combat here, we'll block it here, right? Now, the way combat works is our opponent chose to attack. We now have the option of blocking. We will choose to block, like so, and they will proceed to the damage step, where the damage is calculated, basically, right? They will hit each other. Except our opponent is a rat bastard and has played a combat trick to increase the power of their creature. So ours died and theirs lived, which is kind of BS, but whatever. Now we'll play this Deserted Beach, which will now enter untapped, which is very nice. We have a couple things we can do from this position. We have Winged Words. It's a 3 mana spell. It just draws 2 cards. Now, it's specifically a sorcery. We also have a different spell in here called Dissipate, which is an instant. Winged Words and Dissipate are 2 cards that we'll call non-permanents, which is what they are. They're non-permanent spells. Sorceries are spells that you can only play during your main phases, which are before and after combat, right? Instant spells can be played at any point. But the important thing about these cards is that they have an effect, but when you play them, they go away afterwards. Whereas permanent spells like creatures, as we'll see soon, planeswalkers, stick around after you play them, right? We're going to actually not play a spell this turn because I want to show you how Dissipate works, right? We'll put on full control so I don't miss anything. We will pass to our opponent here. And we will expect them to play some sort of spell here. Aha! They have played Loxodon Linebreaker. Now, an important thing to note is that our opponent played a spell. Or not a spell, they did play a spell, but they played a land. Lands are the only thing in Magic the Gathering that are not spells, basically. I guess with the exception of, like, Planeswalker abilities, but what abilities aren't spells. But as far as, like, an actual thing that exists here, like a tangible object in the game, lands are not spells. We have what is called a counter spell in the form of Dissipate here, which counters target spell, right? Our opponent's trying to play this elephant. We are going to counter their elephant. There are some counter spells that specify what types of spells they can counter. Some counter spells only counter creatures. Some only counter non-creatures. Here specifically, this one counters any spell. Just wanted to make that distinction so you didn't think that you could counter land drops there. Doesn't work. And if I didn't mention it before, actually, I might have forgotten to say this. I'm sorry to say if I forgot, which I think I did. you can only play one land each turn, if that wasn't obvious. You can't just dump your entire, hand of lands onto the field turn 1. You can only play one each turn. Very important to note. Anyway, we're going to play Dissipate. We're going to counter our opponent's spell. They're going to be very sad that they only have this little baby idiot. We're going to play Tranquil Grove here, which will gain us a life. And now we're going to do something a little bit weird here. You've seen, instants and sorceries here. You've seen some creatures on the field. We're going to play an artifact. Now, it has the cost of 2 generic mana. So we can spend any 2 mana to play this. And normally when you play it, if you hover over a card, you'll see that the auto pay is trying to tap these 2 lands to play this. If you want to, you can manually tap your lands too. You can be like, tap for white, play this, right? Now, look at this here. Ecologist Terrarium is an artifact, which is not a creature. It just sits here on the field and does nothing, basically, normally, right? There can be cards that, have effects that interact with artifacts specifically as well. There really aren't any in this deck, but I just wanted to include some so you can see what artifacts look like, basically. This artifact, when it enters the battlefield, I get to search for a land and put it into my hand, right? You can also pay 2 generic mana, tap the artifact, and sacrifice it to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, which is basically, it just increases their stats by 1 permanently, as long as the creature doesn't die, basically, right? It just, gets a +1/+1 counter on it. If the creature dies, or if it goes back to your hand for whatever reason, that counter falls off, basically. But doesn't have, don't worry about that too much, right? We're gonna take a land. It's gonna take an island. Not much of a reason why, really. Our opponent's turn. They're gonna play a Guardian. Now, one thing I want to note here, if you look at the card here, you can see like a weird little sort of shimmer, not a shimmer, I guess like a pulsing effect coming from the card here. Creatures in Magic the Gathering have what's called Summoning Sickness, which means that when they are summoned, on that turn, they are not allowed to attack. There's mechanics that bypass this sometimes. General rule of thumb is that this guy can't attack, which is why our opponent is only attacking with the Shrine Keeper here. Right? They gotta wait till their next turn, and then the Summoning Sickness wears off, and they're allowed to attack. I don't know if you noticed, but the artifact we played before did not have Summoning Sickness. If we had enough mana, we could have actually used its tap effect to sacrifice it then. I should mention, if you look there on the Terrarium, it also requires it to be tapped in order to sacrifice it. Not super relevant when it comes to artifacts, as long as they're not creatures. Something to keep in mind. Anyway, we're going to let this guy hit us for 2. We're going to play an island. And now we have a pretty interesting choice here. We have the Wandering Emperor, which is a Planeswalker. In the history of Magic, this is one of the more recent types of cards that added to the game. They act as, I would consider them like a mini player, basically. Our Planeswalker here specifically has the ability Flash. You can see it there. If you look at the, hard to point to it, but if you look there, the top right of the mechanics listed on the right side of the card, there's like a little tooltip there. I guess I can right click for more information. That didn't really help that much. Just kind of bogged up the screen more. If you look there, this card has Flash, which, similar to instants, can be played at any time. You could cast an instant, right? Does it right there, which is basically any time. The Wanderer also has a special effect where we can play, or we can activate its abilities anytime during the turn that we cast it. I know this is kind of a little confusing, but basically we're going to wait till our opponent's turn to play the Wandering Emperor and then use one of its effects during our opponent's turns. The Wandering Emperor is maybe not the best card to explain how Planeswalkers work, because this is a unique ability for Planeswalkers. None of them have ever been printed with Flash on them. They don't usually do this. But basically, the way Planeswalkers normally work is they have these abilities. You can see like a +1, a -1, and a -2, right? And if you look there at the bottom right, you can see a number 3. That number 3 is the amount of loyalty counters Also, you can consider it life that the Emperor has, right? And those abilities add or subtract life from the Emperor. So, when we end our turn here and let our opponent go, we're going to play their Loxodon Linebreaker. Pretty rude. And play their Knight's Pledge on the Linebreaker. Fair enough, opponent. They should attack, right? We will choose to play our Emperor, because it can be played whenever we want. And because they're attacking us, we can choose to use one of its abilities here. Now, I, personally, am going to make a 2/2 creature using the -1 effect. And when we go to blockers, I'm going to use my 2/2, kill their Shrine Keeper there. Right? So, you can see that the loyalty went from 3 down to 2. We're going to use the -1 again to make another 1 or make another 2/2.
We must protect.
We're also going to play Winged Words to draw 2 cards. Gonna play a Thalia. And we're going to see what our opponent does here. They seem pretty dead set on killing our Wandering Emperor here. They've attacked it with both of our creatures. When I mentioned before that the Wandering Emperor and all Planeswalkers are kind of like a mini player, that's kind of how they work, right? Our opponent can choose to attack them instead of us. And if they deal damage to them, the Planeswalkers lose loyalty counters or life. And if they go to 0, we lose the Planeswalker, right? So, we have a couple options here. We could choose to, block and stop the Wandering Emperor from dying here. We could block the Guardian with both of our creatures. We would lose the Emperor, lose our creatures, but we would also kill the Guardian. Or we can do what I'm going to do right now and just let them kill the Emperor. She's not worth that much. She's done her job. She killed the creature. She made a 2/2, and then she took a bunch of damage for us instead of us taking that damage. So she's done a pretty good job here. We're going to choose not to block.
I guess that's it.
And now it's our turn. So, when creatures die, like our Luminarch Aspirant or our Wandering Emperor, they go to the graveyard. We have what's called an Exile Effect in our hand. Well, usually this is called an O-Ring Effect, because there's a card called Oblivion Ring that this effect has been stapled onto many different cards, but basically this is going to exile one of our opponent's creatures. Now the difference between exiling and being destroyed is that exiled cards don't go to the graveyard, they go to the exile zone. You can see up here, this is our opponent's exile zone. They actually already have one in there because we countered it with Dissipate, which exiles them, right? Took me a second to realize what actually happened with it. But exile cards go to the exile zone, and exiled cards are usually just not interacted with once they're in the exile zone. You'll see here, we're going to play this. We're going to exile our opponent's Loxodon Linebreaker, right? And if you look here, now they've got 2 of them. Now, Oblivion Ring effects are called that because the way they work is if our opponent ever destroyed our card here that is exiling their creature, they would actually get the creature back. Right? Something to keep in mind there. We're also going to play an equipment this turn. Specifically our +2 mace. Now, equipments are pretty self-explanatory. We can pay 3 generic mana here to equip it to a creature. And that creature will get +2/+2, right? Not that hard to explain. So we're going to do that. We're going to equip it to our Samurai here. We'll play this eventually. Don't worry about that right now. We're going to attack with our Samurai. Now, if you look here at the text on our cards, this Samurai has an effect called Vigilance. Most creatures when they attack, like you can see here with the Spiritual Guardian, most creatures when they attack, they become tapped. Vigilant creatures do not attack, or do not tap when they attack. So we're going to quickly attack with our Samurai. Deal 4 damage. And now, in our second main phase, which is why this exists, we can be a little tricky here. We can equip this mace over to Thalia instead if we want to. Right? Now, Thalia has a very interesting effect called First Strike. As the name implies, First Strike creatures strike first. In combat, if our Thalia and the Spiritual Guardian were to fight each other, you would expect that they would both die normally, right? This is a 3-4, this is a 4-3. You'd expect them to kill each other in combat, but First Strike creatures attack faster. They have like their own special attack phase, basically, where they attack first. If 2 First Strike creatures attack each other, they will hit each other as well, like in their own special combat phase, basically. Now, we are going to play a Investigator's Journal here. And, I mean, I guess you could play the Lithoform engine, but I want to actually use the journal to draw cards here. Basically, this is going to draw us 3 cards throughout the course of this game. We're gonna sit back here on defense. There's not much point in us attacking, because if we attack with Thalia, they'll attack with Guardian, and we don't have enough mana. Oh, do we actually? Oh, we did have enough mana. I'm dumb. Either way, whatever. We could have switched it over, attacked, and then held up the journal, but too bad. Our opponent plays a Shrine Keeper. Now, an important part of Magic the Gathering here is bluffing, right? We have a card in hand and our opponent does not know what it is. It's not super relevant right now because we're in what we would call a board stall right now, basically. But we're leaving up this mana to use the Investigator's Journal ability while also keeping a card in hand. Because maybe this is like a really cool kill spell, and if our opponent plays a strong creature, we can play that kill spell on them. Instead, we're holding up that mana and waiting until the last second to instead activate our journal to draw a card. That's all. We're going to play our Lithoform engine here. Lithoform engine is kind of a cool one. It's not a super strong card, but it interacts with other cards in a weird way. Now this one, we're going to use the bottom effect here, the 4-mana one. Copy target permanent spell you control. Our Usher of the Fallen is a permanent spell. But the wording is a little confusing. The way this works is we can only use that copy target permanent effect while the spell is being cast. Because once a permanent enters the field, it's no longer like a spell anymore. It's kind of just a permanent now. So you'll see here, we'll play this. And we'll use Lithoform engine to copy it. And we get 2 of them. Now, one thing I forgot to mention too, as you can see there in the bottom of that text, is that we specifically made a token copy of the Usher of the Fallen. Our Samurai here is also a token. The only thing about tokens is that if they leave the battlefield, they disappear forever. So if they die, they don't go to the graveyard or the exile zone, they're just gone. Poof. If they ever get returned to your hand, some cards, usually blue cards, have the ability to return creatures back to a player's hands. If a token gets returned to your hand, it's also poof, just gone forever. Something to keep in mind there. Now we are going to finally destroy this terrarium. Put a counter on Thalia. And I guess we will Lithoform engine that. Which is kind of cool. Copying this. There we go. We're going to attack with Thalia. They will not block this, because they just mathematically can't afford to. Or never mind, they chump. So they've chosen the chump block, which is a term that you use just to be like, hey, I'm letting my little baby take this hit instead of me taking the damage. We're gonna move this back over to the samurai. And technically we can't play this Dissipate because our Thalia is actually kind of messing things up for us. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Dissipate, not a creature spell, so it costs 1 more. We can't afford to play it, but we can afford the Investigative Journal. But we're gonna bluff like we have a playable card here still. Our opponent has played Serra Angel, which is a pretty good creature to have on the field currently. That's a little worrisome. We're going to draw a card with our journal. Ah, okay. So we can Lithiform Engine and then copy the Wandering Emperor. Not a good play, actually. And the reason for that is the Wandering Emperor is a legendary permanent. If you see there it says Legendary Planeswalker, legendary cards means that you can only have 1 copy of them on the field at the same time. Right? This kind of think of it as like they're very strong cards, so only one of them can exist at a time. And if you have 2 of them, one of them dies. The end. So something to keep in mind there. We could Lithiform Engine it, but that wouldn't accomplish anything because we would just lose one of them. We're in a bit of a tricky spot here though, because I don't know how we're gonna actually kill this Serra Angel. I think the first thing we do, put the mace over here. Guess we swing. They still can't block it very well. They have to either chump block or take... Oh, they take the damage. Okay. Put the mace back on you. And we will end our turn once again bluffing the ability to play a spell or sacrificing the journal here, which we actually can do this time. We can sacrifice it. Okay. They play a weird bald man. I assume they attack us with their Serra Angel, because their Serra Angel has Vigilance. Can't really stop it. There you go, see? I will play the Wandering Emperor here. Put a counter on, and we're going to get a little aggressive here if I had to guess. At this point, we're going to sacrifice the journal because I just want the cards. Now. Lithiform Engine, copy it, draw 2 cards instead. We get another counter spell and a land, which is not great news for us. We, though, are going to put a counter on the samurai, and the samurai is going to start beating in now because I feel like we need to start outputting some damage here. I don't like swinging with the Ushers of the Fallen because the Spiritual Guardian blocks them, and then the Serra Angel also blocks them, so it's not very good for us here. I will kill this. Now, unfortunately here, our opponent... We kill the Spiritual Guardian with our Thalia, but we've dealt 4 damage. We've dealt all 4 of our damage to the Guardian, which means that the Shrine Keeper and the Charm Stray will kill Thalia. But I'm okay with that trade here. That is okay with me. Our Samurai is getting bigger every turn because of our Wandering Emperor. We've got some counter spells in hand. I think we're in a good position here, but, you know, we'll see what happens. Interestingly, they attack our Wandering Emperor to try to kill it. We are going to put a counter on the Samurai, and we're going to copy that ability. Thank you, Lithiform Engine. Now, I assume the Emperor doesn't get an extra +1/+1 counter, but I've never actually used Lithoform Engine on a Planeswalker ability. I don't know what happens here. Yeah, no additional counter. Just goes from 1 to 2. They can choose to block with their Serra Angel and both of their 2/2s if they want here, and then they will kill the Samurai. But even if they do that, it's looking bad for them. They choose not to and go to 1 life. Okay. Our opponent leaves the Wandering Emperor alive, which I feel like is just a strange decision, but who am I to judge? So. Put the counter here. We're not going to copy the Lithoform Engine. It'll make sense in a bit. Why not? We are, and this is worthless to us here. We just tap this to add mana of any color. It doesn't. We already have enough mana, as you can see. We've drawn all of our lands more or less, not literally, but basically. The Ushers of the Fallen actually have an ability, so we're going to copy their abilities here. Activate. Copy. Activate. We're basically turning, even if they block here, like they're going to, we're turning our 2/2s into our 2/2s into 3/1/1s. More or less the idea there. Going to end our turn. Oh, and that saves our life. So, we're going to play Touch the Spirit Realm. We're going to kill their Serra Angel here. And I guess we can do this as well. We can copy that. Exile both of their creatures. Now, in theory, if they broke this Spirit Realm, they'd get both their creatures back, but they're not going to do that. Because now we're going to win the game. Play this just for fun.
Strike fast and strike hard.
I think technically, even without that, we still had the win here, because we would do this. They would block, and then we still do 2 damage to them. Well, you know. What are you going to do? And there you go. There's more or less a game of Magic the Gathering with most of the things explained in it. Hopefully, you know, that helps you out. If not, I'm sorry. If you want a more in-depth guide on how to play, you know, we can go through all of the, you know, the specific breakdown of all of the phases, all of the interactions of like card types and all that. We can go through that in theory, but, you know, I don't think people need that. I think, you know, specifically my viewers would maybe just want this, hopefully. We'll see. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Goodbye.